Hello friends, this is the next question in mains history questions of 2022 mains question paper. So how far is it correct to say that the First World War was fought essentially for the preservation of balance of power? And the first thing we need to do is to underline and highlight the keywords. What are the keywords? First one, the first keyword is about the First World War. We need to first understand and write about the First World War, and we need to connect that with the term balance of power. So, as usual, we first start with introduction. What is introduction for history? Providing historical background or its importance, etc. And introducing the topic. So, in the introduction part, what we need to write? So when First World War happened? First World War happened between 1914 to 1918. And First World War was the first major global confrontation that happened between two rival alliances. These two rival alliances were, first, the Triple Entente powers. Triple Entente. Three countries in military agreement with one another. British, Britain, France and Russia on one side, and the second group were the Central Powers. The Central Powers were Germany, Austria-Hungary, Austro-Hungarian Empire and Ottoman Empire. These were the rival alliance, Ottoman Empire. So the war was essentially fought between two sets of empires. British had their own British Empire, French had empire, and Russians under the Tsars had their own empire. So essentially this war was actually a European war that became global. Why this European war turned global? Because I'll show you a map. This European war turned global because these European powers, which engaged in the war, clear, had their colonies spread all over the world. British Empire had colonies in South Asia, West Asia and southern part of Africa and the eastern part of Africa. They were all British Empire. They were all part of British Empire. And also Caribbean Islands, Pacific Islands, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, they were all the colonies of the British Empire. And the French had their empire. So the French had their empire in the Indo-Asian region. They had the French Empire, and in the northern part and the western part of except for Nigeria, western part of Africa, French had their empire. And also some parts of South America and also some Caribbean islands, they had their empire. And the Russians, I indicate with a red color, the Russian had their empire in the Central Asian region and the Eastern European region. So this was the Russian Empire. And Austro-Hungarian Empire, indicating with pink. Austro-Hungarian Empire was very active in some parts of Eastern Europe, only in the European continent. And Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire had spread in West Asia and Balkan Islands and Turkey. So, if you observe the map clearly, then there were very few independent nations in the world. Almost all the countries were either the colonies of one empire or the other. So what is the conclusion that we can draw from this picture? That actually the First World War was not a world war, but a European war which had its effect on the entire world. So that is the information. You can use very few points as basics in the introduction part. Now coming to the balance of power idea. So the balance of power idea says that if major powers were there in a single continent or in the world entirely, if power was distributed equally among all the major powers, there is very little chance of growing conflict in the world among these powers. if there are major powers, then all the powers must have equal political and military strength. If the military might of any single country has exceeded that of the others, then there is a growing chance of creating many military conflicts among them. So this balance of power doctrine was the most important idea used in the post-Napoleon consensus, post-Napoleon Vienna Congress, which established balance of power in the European continent, which ensured that no single country, no single military power exceeds the military strength and might of the others. But because of another important thing we need to mention, this balance of power was disturbed in 1871 with the German unification. We need to highlight this. This is the main content of the answer. This German unification happened in 1871, disturbed the balance of power. So because of the unification, Germany wanted to quickly industrialize their nation. In order to quickly industrialize their nation, they wanted to occupy as many colonies in the world as possible. In order to occupy these colonies, they came into conflict with already colonial powers, British and the French. These were already the established colonial powers. In order to industrialize their country, in order to become rich and militarily powerful, colonies need to be exploited by the Germans. How to occupy these colonies? By coming into conflict with the British and the French. So understanding this, the British and the French were also quickly arming their own militaries. Armed strength, power of their militaries were also quickly increased by Britain and France, because they believed that the industrial needs of Germany and the need for colonies for Germany would turn Germany into a military conflict with the well-established colonial powers. So this led to arms race. So in the question, we were only asked how far balance of power was the reason for the beginning of the First World War. That is a trick question, because the person who gave that question already knew that there were multiple reasons for the beginning of the First World War, but only we need to highlight the importance of the disturbance of balance of power. In addition to the balance of power, this disturbance of balance of power led to other causes for the World War also, like growing armed strength of both the countries and a need for alliances to have protection from their enemies. And also, when these alliances were formed, the rival nation also felt the need to form their own alliances, and already the fuel was poured all over. And when a small conflict occurred between Austria and Serbia in 1914 June, then that conflict turned into, rivalry turned into a war between Austria and Serbia, and that lit the match. That caught the fire, that caught the entire fuel on fire, and the entire European powers engaged in wars with each other, because already alliances were formed and the causes were there. And when European powers entered into these wars, they mobilized their colonial population, their colonial populations, colonial resources, and colonial armies to fight on behalf of their colonial powers. All were colonial powers, please understand. So because of the disturbing of the balance of power, all the other regions had come into picture, and then the European conflict turned into a war, and this war then entirely caught the world on fire. So this is the answer. And what is the conclusion we need to give? The conclusion is, the First World War entirely led to complete global transformation. First one, what was transformed? Many of the colonial powers, so lost their colonies in the First World War. Russia, there was a revolution. And Ottoman Empire, which was defeated by the British, French, and the American power, was disintegrated. Ottoman power was divided. Turkey was dismembered. So Ottoman Empire was lost. Habsburg Empire, in the place of the Habsburg Empire, many independent nations like Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Austria, all these independent nations were formed. And Germany was severely punished, like imposing heavy penalties called war indemnity, and taking away all the colonies from Germany, reducing the military might of Germany, and occupying the territories and mineral resources, exploiting the mineral resources of Germany. All these angered the German public, and they were now very angry that they wanted to take revenge. So because of many other troubles, they elected Hitler, and after Hitler came to power, there was no doubt in the minds of any European statesman that a new global war would be followed. So in a way, in a conclusion, what we have to write, the effects of the First World War led to many other things, including the Second World War and the rise of the power of Hitler and other totalitarian powers like Stalin and other totalitarian dictators like Mussolini. So they came to power and they oppressed their people. They caused reasons for the beginning of the Second World War. So all we have to write these points in the effects part, conclusion part. So this is the answer for the question about the First World War. Thank you very much.